This is Paradise Regained. Which really is a testament to the amount of people that came here and the types of people who came here. My name is Joey Vars, and I am the staff historian at the Belleview Inn. I'm currently in the middle of a master's program to get a master's in Florida history. We were built in 1897 by the railroad tycoon Henry Bradley Plant. It's really kind of fun to explore the building and see what's original, what's been restored, what's been replaced. And given the fact that we are such a long-standing hotel, the building itself is special because we've been this social heart for decades for the community. So this is the 5th floor of the current hotel, and it had been guest rooms in the old building as well. When we first opened in 1897, these were actually some rooms for servants of the guests that would arrive. If you were to notice on top of some of the wood panels that we have up here, you'll actually see a small series of white ceramic cylinders on top of the wood panels. Those are some of the only remnants of what used to be called the knob and tube system of electrical wiring. And so these are the ceramic insulators, and you would have had the wires running in between them. And that was all installed by Thomas Edison. And we actually do have a picture of him on the pier at the hotel with his son. So that's the type of clientele we would attract at these types of hotels. This is the entire building that was on this property up until about 7 years ago. From the very beginning of the Belleview's life, we immediately became known as one of the best golf courses in the southern US. They became so popular that we had to expand from 6 holes, ultimately becoming a 56-hole golf course by the middle of the 20th century. The popularity of the golf courses attracted so many guests that the hotel had to expand very rapidly, very early on in its life to accommodate all of these golfers. And so from the late 1940s to the late 1960s, you had the second golden age of the hotel's existence. The seasons were filled up every year. All the golf courses were restored following the war years. And we continued to become the very prominent, very well-known golf resort that we had always been prior to the war years. However, by the late 1960s, the travel habits of Americans were changing. You were no longer staying at a large-scale, full-service resort such as us. For the entire 4-month season the hotel was open, you might only stay a week or two, and then you might continue to road trip up the coast and stay at motels and other types of accommodations that were very in vogue back during the 50s and the 60s. So to recuperate some of the financial losses the hotel had, we sold off the outer portions of the property between the hotel, the waterfront, and the golf courses, and that was sold to U.S. Steel. Now, this marked the beginning of the hotel's decline because what used to be our private, secluded park space with complete views straight across the water has now been broken up by all these condo developments in the 1970s. And ultimately, 4 of these condo towers were built between the early 1970s and the very late 1970s. Concurrent to this was the development of the barrier islands. And so what we also see in the 1970s is 20 and 30-story hotels and condos being built on the northern tip of Sand Key. And that took away the pristine wilderness islands that we used to look out across. And this took away the unbroken views across to the actual Gulf of Mexico. When you go back to 1895, when Henry Plant is purchasing the land for the hotel, it was a 1,000-acre property. 300 acres of that were here on the mainland. The remaining 700 acres were the northern third of Sand Key Island. That was what Henry Plant had viewed as the permanent asset for the Bellevue. This is the Bellevue. Our beautiful view stems from these pristine, unspoiled islands off the coast. So at the close of the 1970s, with all the development that had now been done on the beaches, we no longer had the views that had made us famous. And all of this combined is what had started to decline the hotel. In 1986, we lost control of our golf courses. Now, in the early 1970s, when U.S. Steel was first starting to develop the area, we leased them our golf courses so that they could help us maintain them, modernize them a little bit, and then we would buy them back in the late 1980s. Unfortunately, U.S. Steel had marketed the condo development on property as being able to utilize and own the golf courses, and ultimately ended up with the hotel's golf courses being taken away from our permanent ownership. About a 12-year period of time, we went from a private, secluded, waterfront resort with pristine views of unspoiled wilderness surrounding us and 56 holes of Donald Ross-designed golf on property, to now a landlocked hotel surrounded by condominiums without many views really to write home about, and without even golf on property anymore. What is surviving today is actually just this central portion right here. It is about 60% of the original 1897 building, but it's only about 10% of the whole overall structure that ultimately was built on this property. When the building had closed originally in 2009, it was intended to have a full property-wide renovation, eventually reopening just a few years later. However, there was some concern that the building was so far deteriorated from an ideal condition that it might have been more feasible to keep the building removed, or that it might have been easier to fully demolish the hotel. So the decision was made, how can we best preserve the building without fully removing as much as possible? And so with that, it ultimately was chosen to save only a small portion of the original hotel. So I would say there is still some vulnerability in the hotel just because we do not have any additional protections on in a concrete sense. The only considerations now towards the historic nature of the building is just a consideration of the building's history when the time comes to potentially do something else with the property. I believe this hotel is the most successful when it's open to the public, which is really quite interesting because the original version of this hotel for decades was exclusive. If any of this complex becomes not publicly accessible, it would make history inaccessible. And this is history that is for all of us to enjoy and respect. This building is one of the most significant structures in Pinellas County. It is the origin of many of our oldest residents. It is the origin of many of the towns in this region. Well, a lot of Pinellas and Tampa Bay history leads back to the Bellevue, especially when we get a lot of visitors that have come back to us that have been with us for 30, 40, 50 plus years that see what the building is now. They recognize the changes, but they're still very grateful that there is at least something still here to show their grandkids, that there is still something tangible of this place that meant so much to so many people, and it's just wonderful to be able to do that on a daily basis.
You don't know what love is until you've learned the meaning of the blues, until you've loved a love you've had to lose. You don't know what love is. You don't know how lips hurt until you've kissed and had to pay the cost, until you flipped your heart and you have lost. No, you don't know what love is. Do you